gases would be released into the air. So it's a very, very worrying time for people here. But it's showing also that the front lines here are very fluid. We understand from the government sources that they're claiming they've taken the Bin Jawad area back. The opposition forces say they still have it. It's very confusing to get an accurate handle on what is going on. But there is confusion, but there is also ultimate determination from the opposition forces. They're still massing no matter what. They are intent on going down that road and progressing as far as possible. And even if that means their death, they're very committed to this situation. We tend to think that maybe things are going on behind the scenes. There may be talks going on in secret to try and get a peaceful solution, because we haven't yet seen Gaddafi unleash the full might of his force. We know that 200 kilometers away in Sirte, his stronghold, there's high-tech weaponry and there are 4,000 well-trained men. He hasn't used them yet. We're seeing every single day the Air Force in action dropping 2 or 3 bombs, but largely these are missing their targets. So we're asking the question, are the pilots deliberately doing that, or are they just sending a warning signal? We don't know. It's a very confusing situation. It seems to become more confused by the day.
Now, Gaddafi's regime has also been active on the diplomatic front. Senior representatives from his government have flown overseas for a series of meetings. One plane took off from Tripoli, landing in Cairo, and sources there tell us talks will take place with the Arab League. A second plane stopped briefly in Malta before flying on to Lisbon, where Portugal's foreign minister has agreed to an informal meeting with Gaddafi's envoy. And a third plane stopped briefly in Paris and then headed on to Brussels, where our sources understand talks could be held with the EU and with NATO. Alan Fisher is in Brussels for us.
Certainly the suggestion that has been made is that these talks with the Libyans were suggested in the first instance by the White House. So why Brussels? Well, over the next 48 hours, there are 2 very important meetings going to get underway here. First of all, on Thursday, we have NATO, the world's strongest military alliance. Libya was always going to be top of the agenda. We're hearing from NATO that a number of scenarios have been played out, essentially. They are putting things in place to allow the political decision to be made on what they do next with Libya. And of course, a no-fly zone is something that a number of countries have been pushing for. And then there is a meeting of EU leaders on Friday as well. What we're likely to see there are the sanctions that have been imposed by a number of countries against the Gaddafi regime be extended right across Europe. So such as the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which owns shares in a number of companies across Europe, owns properties across Europe, runs bank accounts for the Gaddafi family, all of those will be frozen. So we're seeing Muammar Gaddafi claiming substantial victories militarily in Libya at the moment, but also it now looks as if there's a diplomatic offensive underway to speak to the African Union, the EU and NATO. What will develop will become clear, hopefully, within the next 48 hours. But it certainly is a very interesting development, and Brussels here, right at the heart of what's going to happen.
Well, one of Gaddafi's diplomatic missions has already been rebuffed. The plane carrying the man appointed as Gaddafi's new United Nations ambassador has been refused entry to the US and sent back to Tripoli. It's not clear why Ali Abdussalam Treki was refused permission to enter the US. Gaddafi had requested Treki be recognized as Libya's new envoy to the UN, but the diplomat has not been officially approved. Back in Washington, meanwhile, senior advisors to the US President Barack Obama have been meeting to discuss how to respond to the crisis in Libya. Our correspondent Patty Culhane says officials have been struggling to find a solution that would avoid US military intervention.
This administration has been incredibly careful to not give any sort of opinion, give any sort of hint as to what it wants to see happen when it comes to international intervention in Libya. Now, just yesterday, Wednesday at the State Department, the spokesman was asked, could you arm the rebel groups? Is that being considered? Because, you know, they keep saying that all options are on the table. Well, the State Department spokesman said that under the UN sanctions, the arm embargo, that it would be illegal. Well, today, Jay Carney at the White House said that they thought they had the latitude within those sanctions, that they could do that if they chose to. We're also seeing some contradictions as to what it would take for the U.S. to get involved. Now, today, the spokesman said when it comes to intervention, the U.S. and, of course, NATO reserve the right to act on its own. At the very beginning of this, the administration was pointing to NATO, saying it wanted to see some NATO action. Then they said they would like to see something from the United Nations. Now it seems that the Secretary of State is saying that something has to happen at the UN.
Now, Egypt's new government has warned of a possible counter-revolution after deadly clashes in Cairo, which have been blamed on diehards from the former regime. Fighting broke out in Tahrir Square in Cairo, the centre of last month's mass protests that triggered the country's revolutions. The protesters, who are still camped out there, say supporters of the ousted leader Hosni Mubarak stormed the area on Wednesday carrying knives, machetes and whips, and there were no police there to stop them. Salma Saeed is one protester who was caught up in the violence. She told us that soldiers were among those carrying out the attacks.
We were attacked by the army today and plainclothes thugs, destroying the tents and beating up everyone. And I was very shocked to see the army coming with sticks and beating up everyone and destroying the tents over people's heads. As they were pushing us, they sexually harassed us as well in front of them. And I also, while being pushed, witnessed them attacking the medical the medical point in the middle of Tahrir. We have a couple of doctors who set up like this medical place for anyone who needs medical care in the middle of Tahrir, and there were doctors wearing white coats, so it was very obvious that they are doctors. They also attacked them and broke the tents that had injured people inside.
Well, still in Cairo, the death toll from the fighting between Muslims and Christians on Tuesday night has now risen to 13. The casualties are on both sides. Hundreds of Coptic Christians have now gathered outside the offices of state television to express their anger about the violence. The battles broke out initially when Muslims confronted Christians who were protesting against the burning of a church last week. And Egyptian politician Mohammed al-Baradei says he will run for president in the elections expected later this year. But he says he's going to vote against the constitutional amendments in the referendum on March the 19th. He says amendments are not enough and an entirely new constitution is needed.
I want the door open for everybody to have the chance to run for this, and I reject the fact that some very good scholars, very good people, that will be deprived of this right. Also, this Article 75, it has a retroactive effect, which means there is no even that will be that's very unfair. These are the amendments that we do not agree with. That's why the amendments are fraud.
Well, still to come on the program. Who is the wealthiest of them all? Find out who's made the list of the richest people in the world for 2010, and more importantly, where they're from.
And I'm Nazanin Bashiri in Tunis as the RCD, the party that helped Ben Ali rule for 23 years, is dissolved.
Welcome back. Well, just when you thought the snow was going to end in Japan, unfortunately, we're going to be having more snow as we go towards Friday. Take a look at the forecast map for Thursday. You notice that we have some snow here for the northern parts of Japan. Well, as we move forward one day, you notice that more snow is actually coming into the forecast, as well as some heavy rain along that western coast. So Tokyo